Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. And y'all, we have a special one here today with us. I'm going to let her introduce herself. So why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Hi, everyone. Just so happy to be here. I'm Joyce Abbott, retired educator, author, combat war veteran, and the namesake of the Emmy Award television show, Abbott Elementary.
All right, y'all. Listen, a special one in the house today. So, a quick backstory. I had the honor of meeting Miss Abbott. We went to the State of Black Learning Conference this past year. And when I tell you the consistency of who she is, whether you see her just dancing and having a good time with her family, presenting, being interviewed, she is the same person with the same passion and drive for education. So I'm honored that you are spending time with us today.
Okay, I'm honored to be here. Happy. Great.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So you talk about you even led with it in terms of your experience and, folks getting to know you
Mhm.
now being, like you said, the namesake of the Emmy Award winning Abbott Elementary. Great show, by the way. Love it. Um, you talk about your time as a combat veteran
Exactly.
and how that forged you, built you, and almost even shaped you for the work that you have done as an educator. Can you talk about that experience and what it taught you and how it shows up for you in your work as an educator?
Okay, great question. Being a combat war veteran, as you know, I did 10 years in the military. I learned so much in the military that definitely transitioned into my profession as an educator. First of all, I had remarkable attendance. My whole 27 years, I rarely took off. In the military, you just didn't have the luxury of calling out. You had to get in full uniform, shine boots, and you had to go to what was called sick call before you could even consider taking off. So that was instilled in me, you're going to work. Also, not giving up at the sign of a challenge because everything was challenging. It was extremely challenging. So when I went into my first year with all the challenges, I had just learned that you don't give up with challenges. The challenges, the discipline, the teamwork. Because in the military, that team is so important. Your battle buddy and your buddy is important. So even if you do not agree, because so often as educators or people who are in one building, they may not agree. They may not agree with their colleagues. They may not agree with their administrator. But when you are focused and you guys have the same vision, as far as for those students, you stay focused toward that goal. So regardless if I did not agree with you, because in many instances I did not agree with a lot of my colleagues. It was in many instances I respect you as a person, but as an educator, no, I don't, because you're not doing your job. But I'm going to still collaborate with you and do what we have to do for the sake of, the common good, which is the success of the student. So I did learn a lot: the discipline, the teamwork, just total work ethic, and great attendance. Great attendance.
Yeah. When you speak about the common mission and being focused on what it needs to be the students, I think that there is a level to which the humility that is needed in order to do that may even be lost in education, in the sense of, or not lost, let me say it's just harder to find,
Harder. Oh yeah.
where we have folks who need to have their ego stroked before they do what's necessary and right by students. And that's just my opinion. I would love to
That's
hear if that's what you if you would say, and if that's the case, thinking about, and we'll dive more into it, but thinking about teaching the Abbott way, what would you say to someone who maybe they need, feel like they have to have their boxes checked before they actually hold to the mission?
you're in the wrong profession. Bottom line, and I keep it very straight because the bottom line is for the students. Very rarely did I go to my principals or anything, complain. And let me tell you, I was very outspoken, very at meetings, at trainings, but I did my job. I wasn't outspoken in a negative way. Like I'm not going to sit in the teacher's lounge and talk about administrator, talk about another teacher, or talk about the students. That's why I didn't eat in there anymore. But when you
Yeah.
need your ego stroke and say, well, they didn't tell me this and that. why are you in this work? I didn't need to hear that. I didn't need to hear
Yes.
that. I went in, I did my job, I focused on the students, I focused on them and moving them because being in a Title One school, I didn't have time for all of that. So if you are a person that really needs to hear the enforcement all the time, don't get me wrong, it's good to hear. It is good to hear. But if you need to hear that in order to
To do your job.
effectively do your job, it's a problem. It's a
Yes.
problem because I never did anything for recognition. I never did anything for recognition. And my class was no show. Like when you came in, you could tell that this is the way my class ran. Because sometimes you
Hmm.
could go in classes and kids be like, you don't do this when nobody else is here, so why are you doing it now? So,
Hmm.
I was just consistent. But if you are one that really needs the accolades all the time, you need to really question why you're in this work. Because
Mm.
there's a lot of teachers that go above and beyond and they never get any recognition because I never looked for it. Even with the Abbott Elementary, I was completely shocked. But I
Yeah.
never looked for it, and that's never why I did it. But
Yeah.
it is a lot that are in the work for that. Trust me.
Absolutely. And you think about the work that you've done and there was a question even back in the State of Black Learning Conference from one of my colleagues that said like you are so Philly like to your core and you bring that authenticity they said to your work, which is absolutely true in terms of just my experience with you. You show up as yourself consistently. Now, I think, and I'm shout out to Dr. Dina Simmons. She says you have to know who you are and whose you are. And for me, I think that that's so key for any educator who's looking to show up and be the kind of educator that our students need. Can you talk to us about what it means to be authentic to yourself in the work of educating students and why that's so important?
It's definitely important because you really have to be authentic to yourself. So at the end of the day, when you go home, did you do the best that you could possibly do?
Yeah.
Now, being authentic to yourself, I seen several times when we would come back, for example, off of summer break, and everyone's talking about their luxury vacations and the time, and then we put up, the data. And you have more than 50, 60% of your kids who are still scoring below basic, and you're happy. And you're happy. Are you being authentic with yourself? Because I'm gonna tell you something, and this is no exaggeration. I honestly probably wouldn't have been in cardiac arrest if my scores would have been up, and I probably would have never been able to sleep because I have felt these students. If you're doing this year after year after year, and you still have a job, are you being authentic to yourself? Because this is the only profession I know that you could continue to be, at least when I was there, and I just retired in 22, you could continue to be ineffective and still have a job. You could continue to not move students and still have a job. So are you being authentic to yourself that this is a profession for you because you have other people's lives in your hand that are counting on you to
Mm.
help them change their lives, to help them change their family lives, to help them change their communities? Are you being effective with that? And if not, are you being with yourself that this is the job for you? Because your data is showing it. If your classroom is continually in a chaotic state, year after year, the environment and is not conducive to learning? Are you being authentic to yourself that this is the profession for you? Because this is the one profession you have students' lives in your hand. So I had to be real to myself, even sacrificing if my students needed. I would without okay, I'm gonna help with them. I'm gonna help my students. I'm gonna do whatever I can to go above and beyond. So at the end of the day, I can look at myself in the mirror because one year I was able to move this one student because it was so difficult. And every time my data came and I moved, I used to get calls from the area superintendents. Wow, Miss Abbott, your data. But I worked. It wasn't easy. I worked. I worked.
Yeah.
So you have to be
Yeah.
true to yourself. And that's how I was true to myself. But in this profession, you do find some that are true to yourself, but then there are
There's
many.
some others.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you still have a job. That's why you're going to continue year after year because you still have a job with good benefits and summers off.
All the things. Yeah. Yeah. There is an educator who will hear what you just said and they will point to, and here's the funny thing about us as educators. I'm going to talk about We'll talk about us for a little bit. When we, it's easy, and it's not all of us, right? Because I don't hear you talk about that. And I know others who don't lead this way or serve this way, but there are some who will, when the data tells a wonderful story of success, man, look at me. Look at what we did there. We worked hard, we got it done. But when the data tells a different story, we are very quick to point the finger away from ourselves and say, look at the poverty, look at the family situation, look at the trauma, look at the lack of resources, look at the administration. And so we'll point everywhere else.
That's
And
true.
so this question is kind of a two-parter. The first one is, how do you feel about that being consistently a barrier in education that we point away from ourselves? And then two, with your work in Philadelphia, I know someone who's been in Title I schools his entire career as well. You find that people are coming in to teach the babies that look like you, but don't believe that the babies in front of them are capable. And so they have these low expectations. So a two-parter here. First is we point away from ourselves to all the other things and don't look at ourselves. But then two, we believe that they can't do it to begin with. How do you address or think about those things, and how have you navigated those in your career?
Right. That is extremely important because so often, in sitting in meetings, you hear a teacher say they have been below basic since they've been in school. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Excuses from the past, or no one at home cares. They're not even making sure they do their homework without even understanding what may be going on at home, without even understanding, the other things that these students are facing. That's something that is always concerning to me, especially coming up with virtual learning, where the main excuse was they already lost a year. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? If you are an educator that is truly in this work to truly make a difference, that's not even going to be a thought. Now, it's going to be difficult. And I'm not going to say you can work miracles and wonders, but you shouldn't always say is like, what am I going to do? Or use the excuses. First of all, when you sign up for any school that you signed up, do your homework. Know the history of the community. If you know it's a community or it's a Title I school where the poverty is present, you know this already. So you need to think of things, what I know this child may come in with this, that, and the other. And if you feel that you can't handle it at that time, don't even take the position at that school. But so often, a lot of other schools will not take it's difficult to get in a lot of times in schools like there are in areas that don't have the challenges that the inner city schools have. But I do find that to be a problem a lot. And how I would address that, if you feel that, you cannot do, or you're continuing to say it without saying it's going to be a challenge. Like for me, if I was still teaching coming off virtual learning, instead of saying they done lost a whole year, what am I going to do? All that time I would have been thinking of ways to say, okay, how am I going to reach this? What am I going to do to effectively welcome them back into this learning? I would get on
Yeah.
the camera in certain classes on virtual learning. Half the kids would be asleep. You're not even trying to get them up, because I was a climate manager at that time. So that is a problem. But I would just say you need to question if it's the profession for you, because it's not easy. This is not a easy profession, but we just cannot always complain. And the second part, what was the second part?
Yeah, so the you have the bigotry of low expectations on one hand, right? But you also have folks that make excuses for the lack of production by pointing to the barriers that our children face, and how do you address both of those things? So it's the
Uh,
barriers that the children face, and then it's also the low expectations.
okay, right. As far as the expectations, and I agree with you on that, because when students have not achieved a certain level the years prior, it is sad. I even try to address it at times with colleagues. Like if a student came to me with like straight A's or A in their writing or their reading and math when I was doing self-contained, they said, well, they did the work for me. I said, let me tell you something. A child don't lose a total skill over the summer. They just don't. They don't lose the whole total skill, but go from an A when they can barely even pass me. And then I had to hear from the parents. But so often, when our students are well behaved and quiet, and even if they sit and don't do anything, they're getting A's and B's and they're flying under the radar, especially if the classroom environment is not conducive to learning, but this child seems to be good. But so often, the colleagues, and it hurts your colleagues when you do that, I find, because for me, it was very difficult. my parents because it was so hard to get an A and B for me. And I said, I care too much about your child. But then again, that's what they would always say. They can't do it. What am I to do? You hear that so much. And then so often, the expectations would also bother me. It's even if the children walk down Hall Street or Line Street, they're getting all this candy, barrels of candy. Put that candy away. This is what they're supposed to do. Just saying, okay, you're in line straight, putting candy. The expectation should be, and it was always, this is what you're supposed to do. You're going to do it. I'm not going to reward you for doing what you're supposed to do. But yes, because it was in line or stood straight or didn't shout out, I'm going to give them all this candy. So the expectations is that our children can do anything. My students spoke in complete sentences. Half of them never even spoke slang before. So when people were coming to my class and, what is your name? My name is, and what is the onomatopoeia? They say, how do you get the kids to speak like this? And it got to the point where my students started to see it. They was like, wow, everyone is saying, how do you get your kids to speak like this? Just speaking in complete sentences. A lot of people say, oh, you can't get your kids to do that. Keep the expectation. Our students love high expectations. The ones that
Mhm.
come back to me, they said, you have made a difference because it was so often when it was time for them to interview for a top school, they couldn't even go through an interview because they're not used to speaking. You have to know how to speak. And I told them that that is so important. And they said I was the first teacher ever. And even so many came back to me and said, even how I helped them prepare for college. But that's because the expectation was high, it was not lowered. And I believe that every child can achieve, but you have to keep the bar high. But you can't say what they never did. You can't look at their past. It's
Yeah.
difficult, but in some
Yeah.
instances, you're the only hope. So you got to keep the hope, and you have to encourage them, and you have to reward every little small success. You have to
Yeah.
meet them where they are. You have to meet them what they are, and every little thing. And if they start off by punctuating a sentence, excellent, because you can't have high expectations without support. It's not like my bar was set high and I'm like, you have to do it. No, I gave up lunches. I gave up prep. I would come in very early in the morning. I would stay after school because if my bar is going to be set, I have to support you as well. You can't set a bar high and don't offer any support or be empathetic and understand that everyone is going to grow differently. So I did not lower my bar, but I was very supportive. Because you can't do without it if you're not going to support. You can't say, oh, you're going to have to do this. You have to be supportive. And that
Yeah.
takes time. A lot of people don't do time. I seen someone wrote somewhere on social media that a lot of people say you can't do all of your work in the course of a day. You don't have to work before school or after school. You could do everything in the course of the day. I was like, I would like to see that, or what school you're at that you could do everything in the course of a day.
Absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
I couldn't. Educate me. Tell me something I didn't know.
I think back to my first few years of teaching, and so I started in Camden, New Jersey.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah, right across the bridge. Like, so
I'm
that's where I
definitely
was at.
familiar with Camden.
Yeah, yeah, and I tell the story a lot, but it was voted one of the most dangerous, poor cities to live in. It
Yep.
has a track record, if you will, of some things that have happened. And I go into that year, and I'm sitting in front of students, and this is my first official teaching job. I got the degree, I did the work, and now I'm in front of them, and I recognize, like, yo, I don't know how to teach. Like, I might know content, I know math, but I don't know how to teach.
There you go.
And it wasn't until much later, and even making a lot of mistakes, being handed books and things and told to use this to help, and that stuff wasn't written for the students that I was teaching, but I used it because I thought it was the way. And so I do all of these things that were harming my students, and I had to unlearn. And I say that to say that there are some educators who may be listening who may be in their first year, 2, 3, they're in their first 5 years of teaching. If you could go back in time and you could talk to Miss Abbott day one, walking in to be that educator who is going to continue to raise the bar and all the things, what would be your one piece of advice to Miss Abbott day one?
Don't give up. Embrace the challenge. Don't give up and believe in it. Believe that they can achieve. Because my first year was very difficult. What?
Yeah.
My first year? What? I walked into a class with like 37 students. It was out of pocket. I started the third day of school. First of all, I had to go down and pick. That's back in the day. You had to go down to the board and pick. Nobody wanted these schools. And the lady was like, we need teachers at our schools. So I knew it was only like the worst, whatever. But I was ready to go wherever. And so I went into a very difficult middle school. And when I tell you that class was out of pocket, I really, and I called my sister because she, is an educator. She said, Joyce, I don't know you care. You could do it. I was like, yo, I knew it was going to be rough, but I was like, wow, my first day I had on my little heels and little suit. That all changed. I had a backpack. I still dressed professional, but I put on slacks and the top. Now, but like, it took me it didn't take me maybe about 2 weeks. I had to meet with each of the students individually, the real difficult ones, because I had one girl cussing, I ain't doing the MF and thing. I'm like, what? But just embracing them, and some of them I'm still in contact with, and then understanding the struggles that
Hmm.
they were going through because I kept them one to one. And then I genuinely had passionate conversations. I care about you. I grew up in the hood. I had a pair of shoes for church, a pair of shoes for school. I can understand your struggles, but I'm here to help you. I really just had one to one passionate conversations, East Egg lunch, and they really grew to like, wow. Then they found out, I was in the military and everybody around the schools called me Desert Storm. But this principal was extremely difficult, but I liked him. Al Beecher. No one liked him. I was new to the school. It was my first year. I didn't know nothing but Al Beecher. You can never sit down in the room when the children, and I'm glad because that stayed with me. You can never sit down if the children were in the room. You had to be rotating, even if they're testing. You need to be teaching. He wanted to see you monitoring because so often teachers are behind the desk. He came in
Hmm.
to observe you at the most difficult times. And he wasn't know when you want me to come observe you. Like now, dude, when you want me to observe you. At the most difficult times, maybe right after lunch and sitting in the room. I remember one time he observed me and they had split up a class. I had like 40 kids. But I'm gonna tell you something. This most difficult principal, it was at the end of maybe like 3 weeks. He had called me in his office and he gave me a letter for my permanent file. He said, just commended me. He said, I have never, ever seen a new teacher transition a class, a difficult, challenging group of students, the way Miss Joyce Abbott did. He just like commended me and commended me. And I didn't even see this, but I was working. But it was
Yeah.
difficult. And then the new teacher in the school, I never got any preps because so many people were calling out because the school was so difficult. I was going in to cover everywhere. And then a lot of the classes I was going into, I'm a new teacher. They didn't really know me. So those students were trying me. And I had to really, then I was in pretty good shape. And then they found that I was in the military. Then I started to gain the respect around the school. But my first year was extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult. But after I had my class together and they moved and it grew, and I didn't even really have textbooks. So I didn't complain. I went online, I found ways, creative ways to reach them, different, readings that I could teach different concepts, things that interest them, because a lot of times those books didn't interest them. If I had to teach a skill, I had something that would interest them so I could teach that skill. And I still did that. I followed the curriculum, but I still had to use other things to bring in that interest them so I could get those skills taught. But
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my word. Stay, you can do it. It's a challenge. I didn't hardly get any sleep. I was up.
Yeah.
So it was worth it.
When you just a quick side, I think about I'm in season 3 now of the show, uh,
Yeah.
and catching up on the seasons and things. If you had to pick, and it could be multiple, right? It could be different members of the cast, right? It could be Janine, it could be, Miss Menti or whoever in the show. If you had to pick these different elements that kind of remind you of yourself, what are some of those things that you see, whether it be Barbara, Miss Menti, whoever else, or even Gregory? What are some things that you see in the show that's like, oh yeah, I absolutely can identify with that?
Definitely Barbara Howard, Shirley.
Yeah.
More so than really any of them because she's the veteran teacher. She's kind of no nonsense, but she's caring, and she does have empathy. You will notice that even a lot of parents or people may come back, they know Barbara Howard. Like, I was a
Yeah.
staple in the community that I taught. So when I would
Yeah.
go out on virtual learning, when everyone was scared and said, "But I don't want you out there," I'm good. So, see the little guys that I taught and outside the little delis and acting out of tent, yo, that's OG, that's Miss Abbott. She don't mess with her. So just to respect. But Barbara Howard, she reminds me, or I relate to her character the most. Now, Janine, her caring side, like believing that even with the light bulb, I talk about that a lot, that the students should be in an environment or just believing that they should have so many opportunities. I can relate to that because it was one time a guy came into school and they wanted to give him special, oh, he's gifted. And she's no, all of our students, her passion that the belief that all of our children can, but sometimes she's a little funny. I was a little bit more business,
Yeah.
but I do like
Yeah.
her passion and her empathy. And Barbara Howard, her, she all of them show a lot of empathy for the students, and they try to, although the show is humorous, they try to stay, they are positive in the lieu of all the difficult situations that they encounter, or the lack of funding,
Yeah.
and their teamwork, and they all collaborate even though they may not always agree. They do collaborate for the good of the student. Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, and that's important.
Absolutely.
That's important.
I
And then
wonder. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. In any school, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to turn our attention as we round out our time to your work. You've put out Teaching the Miss Abbott Way. And in it, you talk a lot about leadership and life lessons. For folks who may be new, have not been in touch with your genius, your experience, and your passion, can you share one story or one lesson that they can immediately apply because of what you put out with regard to this book that everyone should go buy, by the way? Let me just go ahead and plug that. Everyone go ahead and support and buy Teaching the Miss Abbott Way. Go ahead, though.
I'm just thinking of one lesson because it is several, but one lesson is that every child that comes into your midst, or every child can achieve, when they are placed in an environment that is conducive to learning and welcoming to learning, and an educator who is passionate and believes in them. They can achieve.
Yes.
I'm real strong on that because we talked about earlier so often what our children cannot do. But
Mm-hmm.
every
Mm-hmm.
child, and I just would want everyone to believe that, because I do talk about, the leadership. I talk about areas in leadership, even leading by example for leaders in our school, because I did end up coming out as a climate manager, but leading by example in life, give life stories, because this teaching and understanding things that are outside of the classroom is so imperative for the success of our students. And so often, but you really don't have to be concerned about it. And so often, a lot of people say, I don't take that stuff. But it happens when they leave out this building, it's on them. That's really important. And just learning and helping our students learn and achieve. It's always
You
is
know,
a
I,
mind.
absolutely. I think about, going back to those that first group of students that I was able to teach and struggled and all of those things. One of the biggest lessons I think I learned that year is to be a student of your students, like to really learn who they are, what they bring to the table, their experiences. And that kind of like formed a deep conviction of mine to use what it is that they brought to the table as their strength and leverage it in the classroom. I
Mm.
think later on, like we're talking year 9, 10 now, 11 in the classroom, I was teaching in Trenton, New Jersey. So I'm a
Oh,
little bit
wow.
more up now. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I'm teaching in Trenton, New Jersey, and I have a young man that comes to my classroom. And there was a bodega around down the street. So they hated the school breakfast. Like, what else is new, right? But they would come in, and this student would bring in. He brought a one of the family size um, eggs, cheese, bacon, and he loved ketchup on his sandwich. That's not me, but that's what he wanted to do. So my student, his name's Tommy. Tommy would bring in the sandwich, and um he would sit down. He was eating it, and every single person that came in and saw him eating would come over, like, oh, yo, let me get some. And he'd break off a piece and gave it, break off a piece and gave it. And I'm just watching this play out. This is like in homeroom in my class. Fast forward the story, I asked Tommy, I said, Tommy, why'd you get the big sandwich? He's like, man, because I knew when I came in here, everybody was going to ask me for some. And I
Wow.
said, Tommy, do you know, do you know that you taught us a lesson that I was going to teach today? He said, what? I said, we're going to learn about percent decrease. Tommy, what percentage of the sandwich did you bring in here when you first came in? Man, I brought all the sandwich. What percentage is that? What
Wow.
percentage do you have now, Tommy? Man, I don't know, like 50%. Everybody took something. No, he was upset. And I said, Tommy, what happened just now is what we're doing in class. And do you know the student, Tommy, who never engaged in any, like he had a hard time. He had like a math phobia. Now
Right.
is connecting with me about how to do percent decrease.
I love it.
And,
I
and,
love
and,
it.
I, and that's what you're talking about, right? It's building those connections so that now we use everything that the student brings to the classroom as a strength.
I love it. I love it. Yep. Real life connections and probably changed him forever. For real, for real. It's small things. They make a big difference
Yes.
and are
Yes.
very
Yes. Yes.
impactful. You know what I mean? Because you put the percentages and with his food, and he was like, okay, okay, okay. That's
I'll
good.
take that. Yeah.
That's good. And then other words for the who just continue to set the bar higher. And that's a motto of mine. Just continue to set the bar higher in every aspect, in every aspect. And you believe in your children that they can achieve. Set the bar higher for yourself as an educator. Set the bar high for yourself because Dr. Bettina Love. When I was sitting on a talk with her at the Amplify conference in Kansas, she said, when we are well, our students can be well. When we are well, our students can be well. You can't come in all broke down and sit down. I'm not in the mood for your stuff today. I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
You can't. When we are well, our students are well. So we have to even set the bar higher, not only for our students, but for ourselves. High expectations, high criteria for ourselves. The way we look, the way we show up, the way we model for our students, for our colleagues, in every aspect. Just set the bar higher so we can make a difference, in this world the way it's going now. And give them a chance. You know what I mean?
When when you talk about, and this is our last question, and I want you to plug where people can connect with you after this as well. But when you think about your spending over 25 plus years serving, grinding, doing what you have to do for students, how did you sustain your passion? Because I'm thinking about teachers who may be listening who are feeling in this moment overwhelmed or burned out about all the demands in education, which are real. What advice do you have to them as you think back over your career and how you sustained your passion?
That's good because you definitely can get burnt out. And the one thing I will say early on, I didn't do a lot of like meditation and things. I was very active in church. I always, church and that gave me some solace. But to just not or try not to get burnt out. That was the question, right? As far as to the people who are in the work and what did I do? Imma tell you what kept me going really was the students and seeing the impact and the difference I was making, and it just gave me the strength to continue, but it is so difficult. So I do even when I'm out speaking, I just encourage people, you do have to find some time to take care of yourself. You do, and your family, especially so many people pour so much into their work. When they go home, they don't have anything left for their family, and that is not good. You have to, have time for your family. That is so important to balance all of that out because you want to be there for your students, you want to be for your family. So you really have to find the time. Even well, one thing I did do, like when I would come in, I would just need quiet time. No phone, no TV, just quiet time to unwind. And reflect. And that was really, really, really important for me. And Fridays, I did not do any because I worked every night when I came in, grading papers on this. But Friday, when I came in, it was work. I did work like on the weekends, but find that time, and especially if you find, because I've talked to so many people that are feeling burnout
Yeah.
and they're tired. So it is to find that time. A lot of people would say take off. And I guess if you need to, I mean, if you're really feeling in a way where you won't be productive that day, that's a thought. But I was a real stickler for attendance, and that's me coming out of the
Yeah.
military. That's me. So, and I very rarely took off. But if you're not your best self, you cannot be your best self for the students. You
Yeah.
You just really can't. But it is important to take care of yourself and just remember your why and encourage yourself because as for me, I didn't need accolades from colleagues. I didn't need accolades from my administration when I was in the class because I know what I was doing. I don't need no accolades. So you encourage yourself. And it's not like everyone's going to, care for you. I was not there to be liked. I was here to do a job. If you liked me, fine. We're going to talk. We're going to work together for the sake of the children. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to do a job. But I still also, and it's difficult being that tough person too. So I encouraged myself and I prayed and, I it fellowship, and that was a good time. I fellowship with my friends on Sundays, and we make go out to eat or things like that. But just keep yourself encouraged, and whoever and pray and talk to yourself. I talk to myself a lot. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
Every day's
Yeah.
not a good day because people think I've never been cursed out, or people think I've never had death thrown at me. Oh yes, oh
Yeah.
yes. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
pick it up because you're not
Yeah.
going home. You're not going home. I didn't suspend. I didn't suspend.
Mm, mm.
And you called me a B. I didn't spaz out. Who you calling a B? I'm no B. Okay. Right? You know, and they knew you ain't gonna bother me. I'm not sending you home. You're not gonna get suspended. I care too much about you. You can call me out B as you want. And that's how I handled, that. And I just gained so much respect. But I was able to keep going because of the impact that I was making as student. And it comes from the students. I got my accolades from the students. They say, Miss Abbott, if it wasn't for you, Miss Abbott, and that was more than any paycheck to me. That was more than any paycheck to me.
I want to, as we round out, and I want you to tell folks how to connect with you and where to find you. But I want to say thank you so much for what you poured into those who are going to listen to this and hear your wisdom, your passion, and the way you connect with folks. So thank you so much for what you even are still doing for education these years later and the impact you've even had on me. So I appreciate you and honor you and thank you for sharing this time with us. Could you please share where folks can connect with you, buy your book, and all the things?
Yes, and I enjoyed being here, and I salute you too as an economic educator. You keep doing it because I know it's not easy. Trust me, but I got you to have your back. If you need me, you reach out. Joyce Abbott, the real Instagram, the real Miss Abbott, and the realmissabbott.com is my website. So reach out.
Awesome. Awesome. Please connect. Please buy her book. And again, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.